Good afternoon, everyone. I, Shashank, on behalf of NEN and Vadhani Foundation, would like to invite you all for this webinar and also introduce our expert. Mr. Nikhil Kumar Verma is a first-generation serial entrepreneur. In the last 12 years, he has co-founded multiple ventures in the internet space. Currently, Nikhil is working for Digital Vidya, a company committed to providing experiential learning in the digital marketing domain. Nikhil is known for his simplistic and inquisitive leading style, which motivates people to think out of the box. It goes without saying that Nikhil has a deep passion for entrepreneurship and online marketing. He is a regular speaker at various online marketing conferences and events. Before I hand over the floor to Nikhil, here are a few reminders for the audience. You will all be on mute. You may ask a question by typing in the panel provided. Over to you, Nikhil.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session for brand building using social media. What we'll do today is try to understand how brands are built using social media specifically. Mostly, since I hope all of us are entrepreneurs, we shall be focusing on how we can do this better without spending the millions of dollars that larger brands we know about have already gone ahead and done so. So, to begin our session, I would first like to share my credentials with all of you. Rather than tell you about it myself, you can look me up on the internet, and this is where you can connect with me. My entire presentation will be available to all of you. So when we start the Q&A, I'll share the link where you can download this presentation and go through the links. So you can save the time taking notes and focus on your questions. My first point would be that most of the stuff on the internet is built around one single intention. That is a consumer internet focus. For you to build a brand that will work very well on the web with social media requires you to have something unique and different. So there's this book I like to recommend. You can buy it if you like, which talks about the same ideology, that you create a product that will market itself. You change your offering in a way so that you bake in the very marketable nature of what will help with the branding. This book propounds this entire theory very well, and it's written by Alex Bogusky and John Windsor. Bogusky is famous for having started this agency called Crispin Porter Bogusky, or CPB, which really practices what he teaches in this book. Just to set the stage, I'd like to give you a brief count on what we are talking about. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, these are the three social networks that pretty much every brand these are numbers we have. I like to share the number of users available on these platforms. For Facebook and Twitter, these would be the number of approximate daily average users. That is, people who use these networks day on day, every single day. Globally, Facebook positions itself as with over 1.11 billion active users. In India, this number is estimated at about 78 million users. These are numbers from approximately February and already have been far exceeded. The number for India available to you, for example, via targeted ads, would range in the very range of 86 million, for example. Twitter is more interesting because Twitter doesn't really count how many people are accessing Twitter at any given moment. They care about accounts. So the numbers here are more of estimates, which will vary based on the source that you're using. Our estimates, which we go with, which are fairly conservative, is we have over 500 million users, that's B, or 500 million users of Twitter globally, and way over 18 million users in India. Most of the other numbers would be far larger than these, but we approximate that in terms of active people online who are using this medium, these numbers are fairly conservative. This is to give you an approximate idea that these are the number of human beings who you can reach out to, at least on each of these media. LinkedIn is positioned at 2.25 million registered users globally, and in India we are above 20 million users. LinkedIn is the only one different from Facebook and Twitter here in terms of offering registered users as opposed to daily active users. This is primarily because unless we happen to be in the human resources function, we don't really go and check our LinkedIn profiles every day, which we do for Facebook and Twitter. So LinkedIn is more of once a week or once a month based on how frequently you want to understand how many people visited your profile, professional networking, etc. So what exactly do we mean by social media? We always prefer setting a bit of context in our workshops at Digital Vidya. So we like to define clearly on what exactly we mean when we say social media. Social media is any medium where the user-generated content, which is content or participatory content, or the participation by the people who are going to consume this content, dominates. So on any media where you have content, which is the point of having a media, you either have editorial content or user-generated content or a mixture of both. Thus, the standard newspaper that we consume is mostly editorial content because it is being defined, the content comes from one place, you can't really do anything except fill in a Sudoku or crossword puzzle or use it for scribbling. However, on a blog or on YouTube, on Facebook, there is very little editorial content. Most of the content is coming from the very people who are consuming it, which would be either you or your friends or the peers in your social network. So this defines what is a social media. By this definition, a Gram Panchayat would be a very relevant example of a social medium, but it's not usually used because we tend to lean towards digital media here. So what's so special about these social media that they cause so much buzz that you're taking the time out to attend this webinar to listen to all of this? Social media, because of the way it works, because of the participation of people who are going to consume the content, has changed our traditional communication stance into a conversational one. Thus, communication has evolved into interactive dialogues, and it has to be more engaging. All this has been inherent, but wasn't largely the focus of communication over the years, and social media specifically adds one extra layer to this entire thing. All these conversations are public. So it isn't for the first time that you can write into a brand like Hindustan Lever Limited and tell them that you really like the toothpaste or they should increase the salt content in the toothpaste. You could always do that. They always had a way you could reach out to them over postal or phone. Now you can do it in the full view of other customers who can know about your opinions. So it makes more important for the brand, for the company to take cognizance of what its users say and think about. Thus, what does social media offer the businesses who are now leveraging this entire offering? First off, you have reach. The reach offered to you by social media, by the way it works, is far greater than any traditional media. That means it's greater than television, than print, than radio, than display advertising, than BTL or below the line marketing with which you could reach other people. Examples of BTL would be the newspaper inserts or the flyers or the distributions or the pamphlets we get. All the other media are stuff you actually consume in a day-to-day. When you look at the number of people you can reach via any of those, they are far lesser than what social media collectively offers you in terms of reach capability, even for a country like ours. Secondly, once we have this massive reach, all the people you reach out to using Facebook, using Twitter, you can directly engage with them, you can directly interact with them, you can have conversations with them. It doesn't take an extra effort after the reach process the way it does with traditional media. And the best benefit of all of this, since this is happening on a digital medium, this is all measurable. However, this is a sort of inside joke. The results here in digital media are always slightly hazy. This is not because it's a digital medium. This is because you as the business owner, as the person who's defining the offering, has to map out what a result is. Do you care about people who are buying your product, or do you care about the people who visited your page and spent 30 seconds there? That's a business design problem that you have to solve to translate your digital marketing into real business. We call this ROI, or return on investment, and this is one of the ongoing debates on whether the ROI for digital is truly there, or is it really relevant, or why isn't it as high? It's mostly a function of business owners not defining sharply the entire cycle and mapping it towards decision process. But that entire thing comes down to how you use social media. We shall now progress to examples of how you can build brands, which is what this entire session is supposed to be about. The definition of what a brand is goes far beyond, and I'd lead that to more intelligent, more experienced people than me, but I'll show an example of something that helps understand this better. A number of times in the workshops that I do regularly, I've asked people if they would be interested in spending the next 90 seconds of their life looking at an industrial strength kitchen appliances product that will literally liquefy anything you throw into it. It's a really good food blender. It's really awesome. It has a lifetime guarantee. It's eco-friendly, etc., etc. But would people who are here for a marketing session be interested in doing it? Would a hotelier, would an IT professional want to watch video around it? The standard reply is no. So let's see what you think of it yourself.
Will it blend? That is the question. I love my new iPhone. It does everything. But will it blend? That is the question. That's fine. I think I'm going to push the smoothie button. I smoke. Don't breathe this. Now, you fans on YouTube have asked me to blend an iPhone, so I did. But I have another. And I put this on eBay.
This video capitalizes on this theory or this practice called newsroom marketing, which is basically the practice of creating a marketing trend which rides on a pop culture sensation. In this particular video, it rides on the fact that the iPhone, when it was launched, when this video came out, was something that everyone went searching for. So when you went to google.com and typed in iPhone, amongst the various results you got, there would be this list of video results. Will iPhone blend would be one of those results, mostly because people who have seen it tend to share it, which is, I think, the common response after seeing something like this. This is exactly what I promised it would be. It's a video featuring a product, which is a kitchen appliance, which blends everything. What you just didn't expect was that somebody would blend something as interesting, something as hard to find, at least in terms of when this video came out back in 2007, 2008, like an iPhone, something that expensive, something that aspirational. So it trades on the fact that there is a brand called iPhone that all of us understand and appreciate, and it destroys us, it in front of our eyes. The only reason this video or the makers of this video did not get sued by Apple, who was pretty much suing everyone who used the word Apple in their advertising or marketing at the time of the launch of the iPhone, is that at no point do they indicate that the product is capable of destroying an iPhone. The gentleman very clearly states that his fans on his YouTube channel requested that he blend an iPhone to show the capability of his blender. He merely obliged them. However, he has bought another iPhone and is a loyal Apple customer. It actually trades and builds upon the popularity of the iPhone, recognizing it. Coming back to our newsroom marketing, another really good example of how newsroom marketing works is Paul the Octopus. Paul the Octopus, for those of you who might recall, around the time of the World Cup in 2010 was an internet sensation. He was an octopus in a glass tank which predicted correctly which team is going to win which match. And that was a lost opportunity for newsroom marketing, because if you were to go to trends.google.com and look at the search volumes of how many people searched for Paul the Octopus and how many of them searched for this company called Pepsi that spent close to $4 billion promoting its association in online advertising, offline advertising with the World Cup, you find Paul the Octopus outstrips the search volume, the internet traffic, the visibility that Pepsi had during the same duration. All it would have taken would be one really smart marketeer figuring out a deal with the person who owned the octopus and was creating the videos for inserting their logo in the back of that glass tank. Full visibility, premium display space, which should have cost definitely less than the $4 billion that Pepsi spent. But it is still a possibility lost. Amongst our real lives in India, we see Amul as a brand that regularly does this. All the advertising, almost all the hoardings that we ever see of Amul are commentary on what is happening in politics, in news, but with a slight twist to it that they promote Amul butter as a product in terms of commentary on the same. All this shows how they have basically established a way of introducing their brand, their ideology, creating a familiarity and a brand recall for their offering using existing channels without creating content of their own. In Blendtech's example, they set up a channel called willitblend.com, which so far has over 200 million views, over 4,000 subscribers, and has over the years crossed 700% increase in sales, mainly because of this property. All they do on this channel, on this YouTube channel, which doesn't cost you as much to set up apart from the cost of production of the video, is blend things that people ask them to. So they have blended iPhones, iPads on 21st December when the world was supposed to end according to the Mayan apocalypse. They tried blending another Blendtech blender and they managed to do it successfully. Sony Ericsson actually launched a phone which promoted itself as the only phone that the Blendtech blender could not completely blend. So they have basically gone and created a pop culture sensation of their own, which creates a brand recall far exceeding what you can do with traditional advertising. Another really good example of what branding is supposed to be all about comes from what your offering is. In terms of what your product offering is it really unique? Is it something different? And how can you get that message across? That's the real challenge that branding tries to solve. What I have on my slide right now looks like a couple of words picked up from a Google search and strung together. But it actually happens to be the name of a food truck, which for those of you who are not familiar with a food truck is the Western version of a desi thela. It's basically this place that sells food that goes from point to point. It has a fixed schedule. It will stop at a designated place. For example, it might stop at New Delhi railway station at 4 p.m., at Connaught Place at 4:30 p.m., and at Janpat at 5 p.m. People queue up knowing the schedule so that they can get the food from this place. Kogi Korean Barbecue Taco Truck is an example from around 2008-2009 in San Francisco, where a couple who had recently got married decided to create a new kind of taco, which is a sort of a snack meets a meal. It's a portable offering that is prepared fresh in front of you at this food truck. The actual offering was a taco, which is why the barbecue taco, but the filling was from a Korean cuisine, and Kogi was the name they gave to this entire offering. So very different, very unique, very innovative, and definitely very tasty, which is why they remained in business and why I'm talking about this now, product offering. The challenge was to let people know about A, their existence, and B, how good the product is. So the exercise that they did was very simply, they put out a flyer outside of their own food truck, letting the people, the customers who were buying the tacos know that if they so chose, they could review the taco that they were having on either the blog or the Flickr account or the Twitter account. And in exchange for this review, the taco that they had just bought would be free. They wouldn't have to pay money for it. Please note that nowhere did they ask to show proof of this blog review. They did not demand that you write the review and show it first, and it has to be positive or it shouldn't blast the establishment a lot, and then they will be paid back. It was trust in their product and trust in the customer that the customer will actually review the product. So you could have the taco there, walk away, not do a review, and the only person who would feel guilty would be you. So the cost investment was free tacos for the people who said they would review, and they did not set up a follow-back system to establish this fact. The result of all of this was that their sales went up. I'd like to give a bit of context before I tell you the numbers and the effectiveness of this. In real world businesses, when we're not talking about social media, if you have run a business yourself, if you have ever got a customer, you will appreciate how much it means to have any increase in sales. Maintaining the sales that you have itself is a marketing challenge most of us in businesses face day on day. So if you have 10 people coming per stop, which was the situation of these guys when they did this exercise. So they had 10 people every stop every day, and they visited about 6 or 7 stops in a single day. If instead of 10, by doing this exercise, I have 11 people coming to me and buying my product, I would deem this quite a success, because that's 10% increase in real footfalls. For a small and medium business, that's a victory. The actual numbers that happened for these people, however, was 800 people per stop from 10. The reason this happened is this happened in San Francisco, where there were a lot of people active on Twitter, on Flickr, on blogs. So the people who discovered the content around Kogi Korean Barbecue Taco Truck corresponded with another set of audience, online audience, who could actually walk up, who could find and translate to a buying customer for these people. So by doing this, they solved the problem of creating a brand recall for them and created a new problem of managing supply of 800 barbecue tacos per stop across 6 stops every day. How they solve that is more of an operational exercise and a different case study, but for the purpose of our discussion, the whole idea was they made the product unique, they told people about the product, and they gave the customer to share their honest opinion, thereby creating very nice, very positive brand values of the trust, the association, empowering the customers to spread the word about this offering, which obviously worked. Hence you're listening about it. What you can also do is, you can't always do this with your product sometimes. So if you have slightly deeper pockets, you can follow the example of Stride. Stride Gum is a gum company, chewing gum company based out of America, that used what was already a pop culture sensation by this loony guy called Matt Harding. Matt Harding was traveling around the world and had a uniquely funny dance move that he used to do. So what he had done was he had created a video of him traveling to multiple locations around the world and dancing in exactly that way. This became a popular YouTube video that sort of trended. So what Stride did was, Stride went and talked to Matt and offered to sponsor his further travels. He had already gone to about 22 locations around the world, Egypt, etc. When they decided to get in touch with him and told him that they want to help him continue traveling as long as he continues doing what he was already doing. In return, all they would want is a mention that they are his sponsors at the end of the video. So the 2008 video called Where the Hell is Matt actually continued exactly. It was replaced at the end of 2008 by his entire travels with a mention for the sponsor who provided the cash for the travel at the end of it. So they sponsored existing popular video, took indirect credit, they did pay for that, but quite honestly on what it was, and gained by having created or having owned branded content which associated with them. Out of this, they got brand perception from nearly 42 million videos and 230,000 likes. These are from this one single video. So it's not always a positioning or a question of creating brand recall from the product or the offering that you have. You can find something which is interesting and you can trade upon its popularity, associate yourself with them, create branded content the way Coke has created this property called Coke Studio Music, and build your base from there as well. A company that has done this really brilliantly on social media would be Ching Secret. Ching Secret is a brand that offers you Mumbai's best Chinese soup, as the current outdoor campaign tells you, or a really effective and tasty Indian Chinese packet of noodles at about 11 rupees or 12 rupees. They launched this company in late 2010 to 2011 into a market which was already dominated by an FMCG giant like Nestle, which was selling Maggi, like Nord Soups, like noodles by Top Ramen. So it was already a cluttered market. So what they did was they went and created a positioning which would work with the target audience of the people who would cause you to purchase Ching Secret. In 2011, these were kids, teenagers in the age gap of 18 to 25 who had a lot of free time, or at least spent a lot of free time online. Most of the people spending time online in that age group find funny videos, photographs, status updates, blog posts that are funny, tend to share them, associate with them. That's the engagement you get online. But the problem at that point of time, once again in 2011, was the fact that there was no India-centric content. You had a lot of Indian teenagers online, but they didn't have content that related to them. You'd have pictures and videos and content talking about Brooklyn, about New York, about the American way of life, about things in Europe, but very few things talking about what it feels like to take the 720 Churchgate local from Virar, what it feels like to try and dodge a DTC bus in traffic, or what Haryana roadways feels like, or what it is to try and get an auto if you don't speak the local language in Chennai. All of these things are things you can relate to far better and respect far more in India as opposed to all the US or Western central content. So what Ching Secret became for all of 2011 is the go-to place for relevant internet meme culture. The example you have on screen is a 500 rupee picture, a picture of a 500 rupee note with Anna Hazare replacing Mahatma Gandhi. This was relevant when the India Against Corruption campaign was happening. You had a strong local connect to it, and you can see from the screenshot itself that they got 6,600 likes and 1,100 comments on this one single piece of content. They weren't doing ads or promotion at that point of time because Facebook was far more organic. They didn't have something on EdgeRank, which prevented most of the people following you from getting this stuff. They grew to the initial few lakh followers purely on the strength of this content. Once Facebook changed and became inorganic dominated because there were so many people on Facebook that it wasn't possible to keep content relevant for them. So they had to start weeding that out. So Ching's realized also that other brands were following what they had already shown would work. And they pivoted around after they had created brand recall to starting to talk about food. You can go to the Ching Secret page today in 2013 and see that they talk mostly about food, but Chinese food, with an orientation on how to create or eat or consume best their product offering. So they took gradual 3 years getting here. Today they use ads because that's the only way of reaching the masses the way you can for such a large scale FMCG product. But they gradually change their positioning, they change their brand strategy to understand the customer. So what your offering is and how your customer behaves online to connect with them. That's the real lesson to be learned here. I have another video which talks about how you can do this very successfully, even if you are someone as simple as a taxi driver.
Good morning. I am your taxi driver, Devesh Mishra. I live in Varanasi. I also make arrangements for you, North India, Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Uttaranchal, and down towards Calcutta. I also make arrangement for hotels if you need. If you need your privacy, I just drive for you. And sometimes if you need, I make escort you and tell about the Hindus and tell. I also make arrangement with private person to you know they are more about Hinduism, My mobile phone number is 0091 941 5648681. My email address is gitsu2003@yahoo.co.in. Please give me chance to serve you better. Thank you very much. You're welcome once again. You're most welcome to see the India part. I also make arrangement for 5 days to 20 days, just minimum. Thank you very much.
The reason I'm showing you this video, which I would like you to Google, look up Indian taxi driver Devesh Mishra on Google after this workshop, and you'll find this video. All these videos are available on YouTube. I'd like you to go through the comments on the video that I just showed you. You'll notice that there are all sorts of comments. There are people asking about the details despite the fact that it's mentioned there. Just people sharing what they think of the video. Some of them don't think very highly. You have this thing called a hate speech, which is a sad truth in real life, which is also reflected on the comments here. But in the consistent thing across all these comments is this gentleman, Mr. Devesh Mishra, has gone and replied consistently to the feedback to his YouTube video. This video was created because 2 of his Swiss passengers had a camera on them. They thought his service outstanding and suggested to him that he should make this video and put it up on YouTube. They helped him do so, but the real important challenge after this was translating that to business, which this guy followed up and actually did. The proof of that is for you to see there, and from the fact that we have actually met this guy. He has come and spoken at our workshops. From being a taxi driver who drove a Hindustan Ambassador as a single car earlier, which was rented out from someone else, he's today a business owner with multiple cars and fleets, the equivalent of a decent sized travel agency out of Banaras. He lives in Delhi, he can commute. So all this has created real business, real opportunity. If a gentleman like him can do it, definitely more upwardly mobile people like us, entrepreneurs like us, should be able to understand how to effect your branding, how to position yourself, and more importantly, how to translate this exact branding into follow-up and customer service. It isn't just about leaving a feedback form. It's about being proactive and integrating that as a part of your identity, that you care about your customer, you are there to help them out. It's a service culture that becomes predominant. So on social media, all of this can be applied very sensibly using what we call listening. The advertising agency Ogilvy has a brilliant pinwheel which they have created a framework on 360 degrees of digital influence. You first start with the generic 5 questions of who, what, where, when, and why. You understand the behavior of your customer. You identify your customer who's going to buy your product. You find them online. You try to understand and interpret what they do online. If your customer is a businessman who travels from Surat to Bombay every single day by flying Rani, finishes his business and travels back by same train late at night, what do you know about him? If you're trying to sell him an iOS application, you will understand that he has the affluence to afford an iPhone. He probably has the latest iPhone 5, but does he use the internet on that iPhone? Is it an unlocked or jailbroken iPhone, or is it the regular iPhone? Does he have a credit card linked to that iPhone? When you rationalize for all these numbers, the number of people who bought the iPhone is no longer your addressable market for your application. Your market now shifts down to people who bought the iPhone, who have not jailbroken it, who use internet. That shrinking number now becomes your market. So now that the number is shrunk, you can better understand the behavior of these people. You can better understand avenues of marketing, ways of reaching out, ways of being non-interruptive. We don't like advertising or marketing that interrupts whatever we are doing. We try to find ways of being more relevant to context. I would like a discount coupon for Flipkart when I'm shopping on Flipkart, or I'm looking around before or after my interaction for a search on Flipkart. When it comes up while I'm actually answering my office emails, it's interruptive. When it comes up when I'm searching for content on Flipkart, it is relevant. That's how we distinguish between them. You do all of this by first starting to listen. If you listen carefully, if you understand the sentiment of what your customer is trying to talk about, what they want, you will understand where and when you should actually interact. How you have to do this is what branding takes care of. How you do this in terms of actual deployment, in terms of actual execution, is really a marketing strategy. But to understand how you should brand yourself and how to make your brand more relevant, you first need to understand the customer. A really good example of how this is more responsive is this campaign called CCD Sucks. Cafe Coffee Day is one of the largest coffee chains in the world, the largest one in India, with over 1100 outlets. They had a small problem back in 2009 or 2010, I don't exactly recall when, where a bunch of people who had gone to the Chennai outlet of CCD were kicked out. They were asked for a cover charge, which means you had to pay a fixed amount so that you can't go and sit at the coffee shop unless you pay that minimum amount. The manager had asked for this, and this wasn't something which is the policy of the company. This was an incident which was genuinely the fault of the customer, or sorry, genuinely the fault of the manager. The customers did not have anything to do with this. So these people who had gone there tweeted about this because they knew that CCD was already active on Twitter, and they tagged CCD. Cafe Coffee Day responded the next day. So this event happened on the 4th of February around 7:30 or 8 p.m. And Cafe Coffee Day very responsibly the next morning found out and responded. The tweets for these are on screen on what was tweeted out and how they responded. The interesting part about all of this is the fact that a lot of this caused a flood of tweets. We notice this in real life also. When somebody starts bashing a person, a brand, an entity, other people join in. They support somebody who's already started a campaign or a movement, which happens even more so because of the low effort involved on an online platform. The good thing to note about this is the fact that CCD took cognizance of this and was active on its feet to go around and turn this around. So these very few people who started this entire thing against CCD, which was initially 64% of the people, went and translated to 49% of the people who remained against this. The fact that you bashed the brand about its fault online and the brand took cognizance of this fact, they responded, shows that the brand actually cares about the customer. We all make mistakes, but good public outreach, good branding dictates that when you make a mistake, you own up to it, you confess, and you show that you want to try and better the experience of the customer. Another brilliant example of this is Audi, or rather what Audi did not do right. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Vishal Gondal, who started a company called India Games, which was sold off to Walt Disney and currently is a merger between Walt Disney and UTV. They make some of the most interesting games in the country. He owns an Audi Q7, which he had given for servicing. Now, after giving his Audi for servicing, he goes back home, enjoys his evening meal, and is going about this regular activities. He expects the car back in a bunch of days after it has been serviced and he can resume using it. Now, Vishal here happens to be one of those few people who enjoy owning gadgets and trying them out when they're still new, when they're unheard of. So he had bought this additional GPS unit to understand whether the Audi GPS is effective and functional or not. He had this GPS unit installed in his car previously before giving it for the servicing, and this was completely accidental. Later that night, he gets a notification on his website from the new GPS he's installed that his car is doing 95-100 kilometers on the Bandra-Worli Sea Link, which is a beautiful stretch of road where you feel like driving fast. He's surprised because his car should be serviced. So he tweets out to them that I had sent my Q7 for servicing. He tags Audi as a brand and somebody seems to have taken it illegally. He's really scared and he links to a screenshot of proof of that. The image you see is the joyride being tracked. Each of those dots are points picked up by this entire thing, and it's going around and around and around and traveling around. So Audi India replies back asking him to DM their number. They still haven't realized that how Twitter works. You need to follow someone so that they can DM you, and the conversation ensues. all of this is happening at 2:40 a.m. in late at night. All this continues happening later in the day, the next day, afternoon. The gentleman who heads Audi for India personally replies back that we are going to check back, we're going to understand how this works and what has happened here, and we would like to, make guarantee that your car is safe, etc. Standard customer response. While all of this is happening, BMW jumps into the entire conversation and sends him a Mini Cooper. They don't do anything on Twitter, they actually respond. So this is a good example of newsroom marketing. You see something happening, you can be responsive and you can jump in. Vishal obviously recognizes the smartness of the brand manager who did this and thanks BMW India for sending him a Mini Cooper S Countryman for test ride while his car is away. This is enough for him who's affluential and afford a car like this to consider switching cars. So all of this has to do partly with the branding that you have created, what you're about, and partly with the responsiveness that is required to support this branding. Just creating a brand isn't the effort or isn't the responsibility of the marketing team also. You have to keep that brand alive in your entire engagement with the customer as well. Social media is really, really powerful and really helpful for doing this, but it takes a lot of effort as well. We may have heard of the term Beer Up, which Kingfisher made really popular in mainstream, mostly because of the efforts of some of my awesome friends at a company called NH7, or Only Much Louder, who do awesome stuff around music and other content. They did a very good job of it for Kingfisher, but this was far less mainstream and was initially started by a startup in Pune called Dulali, who make beer. They raised the funds, they set up the company, and they faced the standard dilemma most of us people in startups do. After we are ready, after we have built the product, after we build the offering, we realize we don't have any money left for marketing, so that people can find out about us, or so that people can actually know that the product offering is there, we can reach out to them. So what Dulali did was create a Twitter account and spend the last 60 days before the product launch, before going live, before opening up the doors to people who could have the awesome beer that they were making for the first time in this country. They listened to who they thought might be relevant customers. They understood people who might appreciate a fresh pint of beer brewed in front of them, which otherwise would either have to travel to Singapore for BrewWorks, or Hungary or Germany, events like Oktoberfest or the beer gardens of Munich. They understood people who had done this, who tweeted out about beer, about travels, who were iPhone users, were the influential class, who were perfect customers. They listened to these people and engaged with these people, not by talking about beer, but about what they cared about. They realized that these were people who worked in IT companies, these were influential travelers, and they shared and created a relationship over time with these people. Then when they were finally ready to launch the product, they went ahead and tweeted out that free beer was available to any one of these people who were interested and engaged with them. I'd like you to go and check out the Twitter account. They still have only 1,300 measly followers on Twitter. But these people hang on every word that this brand says. They don't have to spend effort promoting their activations and events anymore. They have brand loyalists created because of this reason. So all of these are ways how, by understanding your customer, you can create a better brand and translate that to sales. All of this has been done on literally zero budgets by the business owners, investing their time and effort, understanding customers, using social media as a tool. Because of the limited amount of time we have, I will leave you with very simply a list of things you can do. Get the right data for the complete picture, learn the challenges in order the software or the platform, understand the customer dimensions, understand how the customer thinks, rethink the analysis you have made, and create a framework for applying all of this. For doing all this, you need a lot of social media tools. These tools are available to you on the internet. We have created a small list of what these tools are, starting from free tools that don't require any prior knowledge or learning, progressing to paid tools. This link is available to you on the screen, bit.ly/dvsm tools, and can be acquired from the NEM Facebook or Twitter pages later. I am available to you, and this presentation will shortly be available to you. You can reach out to us or attend our workshops. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Nikhil. We'll move on to the questions now. The first question is from Shrikant. He's asking, can you please give some advice or examples on how to promote pure service brands?
Okay. The best example of promoting pure service brands is first off educating people about what your service offering is. When you're purely service and you don't have a product which is already created, which you can talk about, the one thing which you have, if you have customers already, is these customers' experiences. Social media gives you a brilliant way of showcasing customer testimonials by linking to their existing social media profiles. So if my service is consulting, the best way I can use social media for promoting consulting services online is by linking to customer testimonials on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and actually showcasing these testimonials with a link back to who these people are. So rather than me saying that a CXO of a multinational company liked my service, I can say that Mr. Vijan Iyer, MD of OML, had this to say, and you will get relevance of that thing by going and checking out his actual LinkedIn profile. They will also accordingly selectively choose what they want to say, but if your service is really worth it, this will speak volumes more.
Okay. The next one
Other
is
questions?
the next one is from Abhirami Ganesh. She's asking if the product is unique and different, can it be branded in a big way in social media?
Sure. So once again, customer testimonials, user case studies, this is the biggest advantage. Please understand that social media is brilliant for creating conversations. It enables you to go further down the sales path. It gets you closer to that at a lower cost for a large audience. But the whole story here is around conversations, is about talking to people about what they think of your offering. For this, if your product is already awesome, are you doing anything to understand what people think about this? So how big or how small you brand this entire thing is purely a function of how many people know about this. Reaching out to 10,000 people using traditional media is very expensive because of the cost involved. Doing the same on Facebook, on Twitter, on social media is far easier. So nothing stops you from going large scale. In fact, it would be funny if you decided to go and focus on a very niche targeted range of audience on social media. That would be more of a sales-centric effort.
Priyanka Tuteja asks, how does one build a brand on social media if they offer B2B services only? What sort of content is suitable for platforms like Facebook and Twitter in that case?
Right. So for B2B, the standard challenge comes down to a very simple insight that you would have if you are in the B2B business. You very rarely have an offering which can be identified with one single stakeholder. Either this is a very traditional business in the B2B sense where it's about trading and such stuff, in which case you should look at niche targeted media where you're relevant. Digital Vidya is about digital marketing trainings. So we use niche media like AFAQs, media trainings, trade journals which talk about workshops and learnings in the media circles. That's a place that you have to start with. Above and beyond that, it also translates to creating a better perception. There's a very brilliant case study by this company called EMC, which I would suggest you look up on Google, that does this very well. EMC offers IT data centers, which is a very niche B2B product in the technology space. Yet they went and created this entire campaign called Breaking Records, which consisted of them fitting 26 people, human beings, inside a Mini Cooper. Someone who sells data centers did something completely unexpected to help translate what they stand for and help all the people know about the brand. So that case study should sort of solve problems on what you can do on Facebook, what you can do on traditional media, in translating why you are different. Your actual sale will still be B2B, but you can create a better perception using these channels.
Shrikant has another good question. He's asking, is the timing in a day when you post your content important? If yes, can you please guide him on when to tap people on Facebook and LinkedIn for SME consultants?
Okay, so all the questions are good according to me. It just comes down to how well you have understood your problem at hand. So the problem here Can you still hear me? I seem to have lost audio. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear
Yeah.
you.
So, yeah, thank you. The problem here is being defined as something very simple. When do I talk to my customers? If you notice, the content that comes on the television changes based on the time of the day, based on the day of the week, so on and so forth. If you want to sell Harpic to housewives, you tend to do this more towards the afternoons when they have a better dominance over the remote control as opposed to the rest of the family. This is very simply known in programming circles as day parting. What sort of audience wants to consume your offering? They will engage with you at certain time of the day. If your audience is a business owner who runs a shop in Lamington Road and lives in Andheri, when are they going to consume and connect with your channel? Are they going to use Twitter while they're stuck in traffic on the way back driving from home? If so, that is the best time to engage with them. However, if you're talking about educating them and they're stuck in traffic and they're angry, then maybe you want to think of another time. So there is no fixed timing as such, which is the best time for posting on Facebook, because the product that you're trying to sell, the offering that you have, should be uniquely different, and thereby the audience behavior for that will also differ. However, having said that, if you still want a standard baseline reference on when do you get the most responsiveness, Wednesdays 3 p.m. is when internet gets the maximum activity. This is in terms of email opens, this is in terms of Facebook pings, mostly because we call Wednesday hump day, where you have taken care of your overdue emails, your work, your scheduling for the week. On Monday and Tuesday, you've taken care of your daily work activities, and around lunchtime you have enough time to waste away on the internet, engage on various platforms. Despite this, I would still advise actually trying all these things out on Facebook, because it really doesn't cost you anything to use Facebook. With the kind of audience you have in mind, target them, understand their behavior, and then accordingly adapt your programming schedule.
Kesam Murthy has a problem that he needs a solution for. He says he has a travel/tourism company and he used Facebook to promote the page, and most of the people who liked it were spam accounts. So how effective is that, or is he doing some mistake, is what he's asking.
Okay, so first of all, I would say that you don't have a problem. You always had a problem, today you know about it. If you did the same thing over television, you would never know about this, right? That's the first thing. With Facebook, you're cognizant of the fact, and you can stop wasting money doing the mistake that you seem to have made already. Having said that, I don't really mean to offend you by saying this. My point in this is your earlier campaign of promotion would not have been targeted at certain people. If it was targeted and you still got the response, then there was something wrong with your targeting or your understanding of your customer audience. Using Facebook, I can choose to target people who exactly fit my demographic. For example, if I have a product that is meant for educated married women whose kids are attending colleges, for example, tutorials like Fiji for better preparing on your own for the IIT entrance exam, I can create a Facebook campaign targeting married women who went to engineering college themselves, who have kids with in the age group 16 and above. So these are people who are already in their junior college. Facebook tells me that this number would come to between 2,800 women on Facebook. So I can choose only to target these people. So any interaction I have with such a limited audience would be relevant. In the case of our friend here who said that they were spam accounts, it meant that he targeted a general campaign, or he did not use targeting, he just did ads on Facebook minus the targeting, which is why spam accounts were able to filter it. My suggestion would be try targeting and limiting, which will require you to define the behavior of your audience further. Before we take further questions, I'd like to share with you the link to today's presentation. You can go to bit.ly/dvbranding and download the entire presentation and links to all the videos I shared with you. The D and V needs to be capital, everything else is lowercase. Any other questions, Shashank?
Yeah, we'll be taking our last two questions. There is a request from Rahul Bharve. He's asking, can you please speak more about the ROI on social media?
Okay, sure. Can I also have the second question?
No, you can. I'll get back to you later.
Sure. Okay. So ROI is usually the, Friday evening topic of jokes and conversation amongst most digital marketers, mostly because of the fact that I can define an ROI for the process you define for me. I can tell you how many fans came, how many people liked. I can tell you that if I posted a video on my Facebook page, 1400 people saw it, 35 of them clicked on it. Out of the 35 that clicked on it, 16 played it. 8 of them actually clicked on the link in the description and went to the website, which had the call to action for your actual activity where you did the entire video. Of the people who did see it, this is the splicing by demographic. These many of them were men, these many of them were women. This is the age group they belong to. These are the cities they came from. All this information is available to me. The problem is that all this information is available to me in terms of Facebook behavior. For me to define an ROI in terms of Facebook, it's already there. I don't have to do anything. Facebook presents this using what is known as Insights dashboard. The challenge comes when I have to define a business return on investment, for which I require to redefine this entire engagement cycle in terms of business volumes. If I posted the video so I could sell more, say, diamond necklaces, I need to understand what my investment was so that I can define the return in terms of it. So I'll first map out exactly what my investment of in terms of resources used, in terms of time it took to produce the video, in terms of the education and the market research spent for defining that entire targeting. After that, I take care of all the other investments which are not always very well defined. Investments are not just in terms of money or resources, there are also cost investments in terms of effort, in terms of technology cost. If I'm setting up a new platform that will automatically post videos of people who are walking into my store, how much technology do I need to spend upon? How much effort do I need to learn all of these things? All this is one long chain of an effort called business design. I need to understand how much effort am I actually putting in my profit and loss sheet, in understanding how my business works. Then I have an accurate cost of how much investment this cost. I'll give you an example of this. I have been active on Twitter since 2008. I've been tweeting out since then. I have 47,000 tweets sent out. 2,900 odd people seem to follow me for some reason I don't yet understand. Now, if I say that I put out a tweet right now, and because of it, I'm able to connect with 8 people for whom I do consulting, and I get business worth, say, 10,000 rupees from each of them. So then, for my tweet that I have put out, the 2 minutes I spent putting out the tweet got me 80,000 rupees of business. How do I define ROI for this? I can't, because it isn't just these 2 minutes. It's all the work I've done before that created the branding that I have today. It's all the effort over the 8 years where I engage with these people that goes towards contributing. That's my true investment. If I can measure that finitely, then I can create a finite social media ROI. So the challenge comes from the fact that we very rarely have ROI cycles defined for our business, let alone for digital. You do that, it will become very simple to identify what of it is from social media, what is from digital, what is from your business, and you will be able to get everything that is digital finitely and accurately. That's the only real way of finding an ROI of anything, let alone social media. The final question, Sasha?
Shivkumar Khabra comes with this final question. He says he has a page of his firm on Facebook. If he wants to publish a new advice which is useful to both his friends and his customers, then should he share the same or post it on the personal Facebook ID too?
Okay, so this is something that I learned the hard way. Do both. Do exactly what you just suggested. Post it as a Facebook page as a business, because mostly when you use a Facebook page, Facebook lets you measure the reach, the effectiveness of all of this using something I call insights. It's available to you when you're an admin of the page, and it helps you understand how effective in reaching out your communication was. So in case of our friend here, my suggestion would be all communication should be done on the page itself as the page. However, I can still further that. It doesn't cost me anything to promote that amongst my friends. So then I should reshare the post from this on my personal profile with a note explaining that this is my business, I would like you to see it. That will be visible by their friends, and that he can further prompt his friends that they can follow the page for regular updates about this. The difference between doing this and only doing via the personal way is, if you do it on your personal profile, Facebook doesn't tell you how many of the people it actually reached out to. The measurability gets lost, mostly because it's not standard human behavior to know how many people read what. That's a business behavior, and Facebook positions pages for that. So once again, in recap, please post it from your page and share that content with a brief explanation on your personal profile. You'll get the best outcome of this.
Thank you very much, Nikhil, for that interesting session.
Is that all, Shashank?
Yeah, that's all. And thank you all for the attendees too for participating in this webinar. We are glad that the questions kept coming in, but due to lack of time, we are unable to answer them all. Please do send in your feedback and suggestions to us at eclub@nenglobal.org. Also, if you found the session interesting, feel free to blog or post about it. The recorded version of the webinar will be available on our website eclub.nenonline.org by tomorrow. Also, join us for our next webinar on Growing Your Business Online by Mr. Sharad Singh and Mr. Sandeep Shekhar from Shopzilla on 7th August at 3 p.m. Thank you once again and have a nice evening.
Thank you.